we understand that Samson Itodo has since joined us in our studios in Abuja. He's the head of Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. That's YAGA. We still have Mr. Buko Kiari, who is a former chairman, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, also in our studios in Abuja. Samson, thank you for joining us today. Well, looking ahead of tomorrow, yes, we do know the last time out, INEC said they had some issues, haven't improved upon the turnout in terms of when they were going to open the ballot. Previously in Osun and Ekiti elections, they said, look, if you have heavy downpour on some of those challenges, it could only affect when the INEC officials will turn out. What do you expect tomorrow? Because in the last time, we understand it was about, as at 10 a.m., 41% of polls had opened, which is not what people expected. From what the feelers you get an indication that this time around it will be far better than what we had during the presidential elections?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain, and good morning to you all in Lagos and to Nigerians. I would say that I have cautious optimism on how things will play out tomorrow because the build up to the presidential elections, but we're giving all the assurances, and Nigerians were told that all the issues relating to election logistics have been sorted, but we saw what happened on the 23rd in the morning, where at about 10 a.m., like you said, only 41% of polling stations had opened, and at 11:30, only 73 or 74% of polling stations have opened. And so I do have cautious optimism. We will just keep watching, but also urge the Electoral Commission to ensure that the polling stations open tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I think INEC does have an opportunity to reverse some of the logistical issues that were observed in the presidential elections. And I do hope that they seize this opportunity. We've received assurances from the Electoral Commission that issues relating to logistics deployment have been managed and have been addressed. We at YAGA Africa have deployed about 680 observers in all the 680 local governments in the 29 states where the governorship elections will be holding. And for the states without governorship elections, we didn't deploy observers. And based on reports that we received this morning, there is some appreciable level of deployment of sensitive materials to the local government. And we expect that the racks will be activated today, so polling stations can open tomorrow. All right. But there are also other issues that INEC also needs to address. First is the polling stations where the rerun elections will be conducted tomorrow. INEC is yet to make that list public. And so my concern is for people who are going to be voting in those polling stations, a lot of them may not know or are not aware that rerun elections are taking place in those places. And so they will come with the expectation that they would receive 2 ballot papers, one for the governors and then one for the State House of Assembly, depending on the states where these elections are taking place. And I think INEC needs to ensure that that list is made available and is published for stakeholders and citizens to know the exact locations where these rerun elections are taking place. The second critical issue deals with the transparency of the results collation process. Now, you look at the number of rejected ballots in the presidential elections. It was about 1.2, and that's about 4.2% of votes, which is a record high from 2015, where 2015 were oscillating around 2.9% number of rejected ballots. If you look at the numbers of cancellations as well, they were very, very high. And from the presidential elections at YAGA Africa, it was our considered opinion that some of the cancellations were targeted at suppressing the votes of political parties. And with this discrepancy in the application of the electoral guidelines in relation to who is responsible or who has the power to cancel and what are the conditions for cancellation, INEC needs to make a public pronouncement on the issue of the cancellations. Yes, the INEC guidelines provides for conditions, but I think it's important that INEC makes a public statement or issues a public statement on the conditions, because if you look at some of the reasons why these votes were cancelled at the presidential elections, some of them were not necessarily contained in the guidelines. You see, even last week or this week, INEC had to reverse some decisions that were taken on some elections because of the lack of understanding and the misapplication of the guidelines. These are fundamental issues INEC needs to address. In fact, if INEC can, the form EC40G that it's meant to capture the polling units and the number of registered voters that were cancelled. One of the missing items on that particular form is the reason for the cancellation. I think INEC needs to ensure that when cancellations are made, the reasons are stated on that form. And then party agents should have copies of these forms. So in their tabulation, they also know why elections were cancelled. The third issue deals with the voter accreditation process. One of the controversial issues that evolved from the presidential elections was, one, either the use of the card reader across different polling stations for accreditation. The PVT data, which YAGA deployed, shows that in about 7% of polling stations, they were not, the polling officials didn't use the card readers for accreditation. Yeah. Now, INEC has issued a statement in the build-up to these elections on the use of the card reader, and say for elections, for polling units where card readers were not used, those elections will be cancelled, but also enforcing and emphasizing the use of the card readers. It is very, very important. And for presiding officers and for every citizen who is going out to vote tomorrow, please keep watch over the process. If there's a polling station where card readers are not used, please make that announcement, expose it, and we would have to monitor how INEC applies its own guidelines on the cancellation or recording of 0 votes for those polling stations where card readers were not used. The fourth deals with the announcement of the total number of accredited voters. If you look at INEC's manual, if you look at the guidelines, there's some lack of clarity on whether the presiding officer at the conclusion of polls will make an announcement, will announce to everyone the number of total accredited voters from the card reader, as well as the list, the voter registration list. That confusion came up in the presidential election, and you could see that there was some discrepancy or some inaccuracy rather on the figure of the total number of accredited voters and those who actually voted. Yeah. The fifth for us at civil society is the role of the security agents. We don't want to go into tomorrow's election seeing the military taking over election security operations. And that's totally unacceptable. And what happened in the presidential elections, where military, and it is on record that military deployments and soldiers did not only constitute, did not only interfere with the deployment of materials, but they were also intimidating voters. We have it on record on how the military shot a young man in Yobe State. We also have it on record where in Karo Nyanya Expressway, where the military created a blockade. And this role, this negative role that the military is playing is totally unacceptable. And we hope that what the Chief of Army Staff said about his men who will be tough in this election, it is not targeted at intimidating voters. It is not targeted at intimidating opposition, depending on the states that they are, but it is geared towards ensuring peace. The law is very, very clear on the role that the military has to play. And I urge the president, who is the president of Nigeria, to call the military and ensure that they don't interfere with these elections, and they maintain whatever the responsibility that they've been assigned, which is simply protecting election materials and personnel based on the request of INEC. And so if INEC does not make that requisition, then the military does not have any business in managing election security operations. The police is responsible, and we hope that the IG, as he has assured Nigerians, we will see the police demonstrate the professional role that they played in the last presidential elections